Following is a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about them Cowboys?
Yeah!
Go Cowboys!
Let's go, baby!
Are you ready for a break?
Yes.
Are you ready for a break?
Absolutely.
Ready for a break?
Yeah, and so much for that.
It's time for The Break on DallasCowboys.com.
We were on a break!
With Ambar Garcia, Bryan Broaddus, Nick Harris, and Derek Eagleton.
It is Wednesday, February 19th, 2025, Season 20, Episode number 103. Welcome to the latest edition of The Break. We are live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star, presented by LG. LG is the world's #1 OLED TV brand for 11 years and counting. See why at LG.com/OLED Evo. Man, it feels like forever since we've been on the air.
Yeah, it has.
It kind of has been forever since we've been on the air. 2 weeks to be exact. We were out last week, but this week we are back. Not weather notwithstanding, a lot of things going on
what
here in
was
Dallas.
last week?
No, we were here last week.
We were here.
We're here.
Last week.
It was the 2 weeks before that. Well,
Yeah.
at least for me, for
Yeah,
Super
for
Bowl, Super
Nick.
Bowl.
We all learned that we have to look at cameras.
Oh yeah,
we
that
now
was
we
last
focus on you.
But it still feels like a long time.
It feels
ago.
like a long time. When you're not doing it daily, it always feels like it takes forever to get back around to another episode. But we got a lot we're going to talk about today. We got to mix in a few different topics here. The assistant coaches for the Cowboys talked yesterday. We'll talk about that a little bit, some of the things that stood out there. Let's talk a little bit, too, about franchise tags. The window opened yesterday. Cowboys and every other team in the NFL have until March 4th to decide on that. If they're going to be if there will be a player that they will use a franchise tag on, we'll talk about that. And then we'll get to some draft previews. Bryan and Nick, we're going to try to do this every episode between now and the draft. Let you guys kind of give us a little taste of the kinds of things you're talking about over on the draft show. Today we'll focus in on a couple players that we think should be or could be targets for the Cowboys in the first round, and let you guys give us some breakdowns there. We may even get to a little Yeti time with AG. We'll see how that goes if we get some time. We got fan questions also lined up. We got so much stuff we can hit today.
Cool.
So we'll see how far we get into this. As Amber always says, we'll only get to about half of it.
Yeah, I was about to say false promises around here.
So that will only mean that my show rundown is ready for next week. All right, let's start first with the assistant coaches. They spoke yesterday. I know everybody had a chance to look at some of the different information or look at some of the quotes that came out of that. Was there anything particular that stood out to you as you looked at that or as you listened to those coaches talk that you think that impressed you in some way?
Yeah, I would like to start with Clayton Adams just because I think there's more intrigue in him than any of the other coordinators or assistants. I give the caveat of Eberflus just because he is the former head coach in the building. But Clayton Adams, I was really intrigued to see what he had to say, and he definitely backed that up. I wrote down a few notes that I thought were interesting from him. We could start with the quote that stood out to me more than any of them in the 15-minute availability he had is, how can we be multiple? How can we be different? And I think that is a key philosophy that this team needed last year. It needed probably the last 2 years. And if they can figure out how to marry that concept with what Schottenheimer already has in place, that'd be huge. And what does that mean? That means being creative in the run game. That in Clayton Adams' case, it includes pre-snap motion, which Brian Schottenheimer has talked about many times, how that helps in the pass game. That was the quote that really stood out to me. And then there was a question asked as well about, Clayton Adams. He comes from the Cardinals. He was the offensive line coach there for a few years. He obviously had Kyler Murray running the ball behind him. Dak Prescott is not Kyler Murray from a running perspective, but he was basically asked, is there anything you would like to use with Dak from a mobility standpoint so that you can keep him involved and, have that same type of offensive concept move to Dallas? He said, if you're reading off of a play, it takes a digit off the board defensively. What does that mean? You have one player on the defense that always has to be accounted for Dak Prescott on every snap if the threat to run is there. Now, what does that look like with Dak Prescott's health? That's what we're going to have to figure out down the line. And Clayton Adams said yesterday that they're at a period in time right now where they can't even talk football with the players. They can really only introduce themselves over text or call and say, hey, what's up. But once those football conversations start to come around, maybe OTAs or minicamp, that's going to be a big one, just because how healthy is Dak Prescott's legs, and they have 4 years that they need to use Dak Prescott in. So are they willing to run him as much as they did in 23 or as much as they did prior to his injury in 20? And then the last thing, and I don't want to take everything from my man to my right here, but create violence, run, hit. Everything we do schematically needs to play into that. Yeah. That's the big one. And I think if that can marry well with what Schottenheimer does in the pass game, if they can have a little bit more violence, a little bit more toughness offensively, then obviously it would transition over defensively as well.
Never say that you don't have a few words. You're a man of not few words. That was
Sorry about that.
Took a page out of my book at that time, so thank you for what you did. Where I think a mandate came down from the offensive side of the ball. I heard the word toughness, and we talk about toughness quite a bit. And I think the mandate is to Will McClay and to these scouts and to the personnel guys and gals that work in this building, is that they need to get to be a tougher football team. And that's, we talk about the violence and things like that. But now you look at, you have an idea as a former personnel guy myself, if I'm listening to these coaches talk and trying to get an idea, get a pattern of what I'm hearing, it's like we need to earmark tough football players. And it's, to play this game, you have to be tough. But there takes a little bit more of an inner toughness, and we've seen this. This team has been good enough to win division titles. Has it been good enough to win conference titles, go through the playoffs? Tough teams do that. Tough mentally, tough physically. I think the mandate from the coaches is we want to be a tougher team. And so with that being said, Will McClay, the personnel folks over there have got their marching orders, and I think you're going to see a direction of going that way.
Yeah, I'm right on board with you guys with that being the main thing that stood out to me during his time with the media. We talked about it last year. You look at other teams around the NFL, and we talked about that whole point of how are these other teams being more aggressive on the field. And it's something that the Cowboys have lacked, and you don't see that same type of aggressiveness when they're on the field playing. And offensively, that's an area where it's highly needed. And right now it's difficult for them to answer what it's exactly going to look like, because you still don't have all your players yet, all your personnel in that area. We got to wait until the draft and you start building that roster. But the fact that that's the question that's being asked with him coming in here and saying, okay, that's a great area. How are we going to be more violent? How are we going to be more aggressive? How are we going to allow these players to run more free and be able to just hit and be more violent in that way? So right now, again, there's not much that they can answer at this moment, but the fact that those are the questions that are being presented, the things that are being talked about, that's something that's a positive that you want to hear, because we talked so much about just being very aggressive in the passing game, in the run, being able to, and something that also stood out to me was the fact that he talked so much about the offensive linemen, and some of the things that they're looking to improve in that area, that we know that's a huge part right there. We still don't know what's going to happen at the running back position, but it all starts with the line. And he mentioned that that's a high area of focus for him coming in and just trying to figure out what they do there with the offensive line.
So I hear violence a lot when we're talking here. Mm-hmm. My question, as I was listening to some of those comments, is violence is the ability to be more violent, more I don't know, to be able to push your opponent around. Is that really something that a coach can create, or is that really about the player and the player having to have that mental makeup to just be that type of player?
I think it's a mentality, but I also think that when you evaluate your team, you can weed out who you feel like, okay, when it comes to mental toughness or physical toughness, these are the players that we can surely hang our hats on. I think that they're going to be, I think this defensive unit is going to look remarkably different from what we've seen the last couple of years. I think it's look different scheme-wise, and I think it's going to look different personnel-wise, just because of how players come and go, the situation that the Cowboys are up against with their cap in some areas. So I think that, to me, now this is the opportunity. As I mentioned earlier, This personnel department now has the task of going out and getting those type of players. The players, we saw a tough mentality in the early 90s with Jimmy Johnson. That was a tough. If you ever went to a practice in Austin at St. Ed's, you saw toughness. You ever went to, some of these practice, even a Jason Garrett practice had elements of toughness to it because of the way that they work the players. So to work the players that way, you have to be able to find players that can adapt and welcome that kind of coaching, but play with that kind of mentality.
It's kind of both, is what you're
it's
saying.
both.
You got to have both.
Absolutely
it's the
both.
coaching and it's
yeah,
the players.
it is, and it's not a ride the fence thing, because you know me, I hate the ride the fence. I want to give you an answer one way or another, but they are now tasked, the personnel guys. They're tasked to trying to find tougher players, and like I said earlier, this game playing it is tough. It's tough to play, but you have to have a certain level of that little bit more toughness in order to be that type of team that you want to be.
Yeah, and it certainly doesn't happen overnight either.
No.
It's going to take some time, and that's where you hope that this staff has the time to really enact that and put that in place, not only from a personnel acquisition standpoint, but from a philosophy standpoint. It's not going to happen overnight. It can't happen in one season. So, if this staff remains in place for 3 years, what does that look like compared to today?
I think sometimes you either have it or you don't. Physically, yeah, you're going to have some limitations there, and some players might not be able to do the same as others, but it helps a lot depending on the voice that you have, the voice that you're listening to, and somebody that brings that in and starts changing that culture. Like, you talk to me, and if I listen to David Goggins, all of a sudden I feel like I can be a Navy SEALs and be in that cold water in the ocean. Is that actually going to happen? No, I'll probably quit after 2 seconds. But I think the voice that you have, it's highly important. And it has this thing where it's contagious, and everybody else around you, I think it starts making you tougher. And when you see somebody else trying to be tougher, you yourself, you want to be able to keep up and try to keep up. So I think it's maybe not with every single player, it's going to be that instance, because again, everyone's physically different, but it's a start and towards the right direction in trying to change that mentality and the whole culture inside the locker room.
Yeah, I think you get into real quick, Derek. I think you get in a situation, for examples of last year's team. I don't think Zach Martin was perfect at all health-wise. We all understand that. But Zach Martin, future Hall of Fame player, playing through injury, that's an element of toughness. And if you're Brock Hoffman and you're Tyler Smith and your other guys, and you're watching what he's going through and playing, it's not perfect, but you get that element of like what it takes to go out there and play every day. And I think those are the types of examples that you need to get on this football team. We talk about this every time that you play the 49ers. You feel like that you're not tougher than them. There's a certain element to this, and it's one thing to talk about it. It's one thing to execute it. They're talking about it right now. They need to make sure that they execute it, but that's through the players.
All right, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to talk about the franchise tag. We're going to talk about any players that we think could be possibilities, and maybe what the advantages could be for the Cowboys if they decide to go that way. We'll do that when we come back. DallasCowboys.com radio.
Todd thought it would be secure to jog in the cheetah savanna. Todd believed the big cat repellent he bought online was reliable. And now, Todd is trying to be faster than this cheetah that can run 80 miles per hour. But the good news is, Todd has AT&T 5G that is fast, reliable, and secure. And he learned the best thing to do is stop running and toss her the backpack with the beef stew. AT&T 5G. Fast, reliable, secure.
5G requires compatible plan and device. 5G may not be available in your area. See att.com/5G for you for details.
It's the official men's skincare brand of the Dallas Cowboys, Jack Black. And right now, Cowboys fans can get 15% off their $75 order. Plus, because every deal needs a playmaker, your order will include a free 5-piece skincare set and free shipping. The Jack Black Playmaker is 4 of Jack's favorites and a full-sized intense therapy lip balm. Make a play for the Playmaker at getjackblack.com/Cowboys with the code CowboysVIP. That's getjackblack.com/Cowboys with the code CowboysVIP.
Don't put off getting your oil change, Dallas. Take 5 Oil Change, a proud partner of the Cowboys, is faster than you think. They're so fast, you don't even have to get out of your car. You can take advantage of Take 5's stay-in-your-car 10-minute oil change at any of their locations across the Dallas area. And remember, at Take 5, you stay in your car because they're faster than you think. That means you won't even have time to show off your best touchdown celebration. Take 5, the official oil change of the Dallas Cowboys.
From the field to the festivities, Lucchese embodies the essence of luxury and tradition. Handcrafted with meticulous precision, each pair offers unmatched comfort and style. Stand tall while you're tailgating or cheering in the stands with the Dallas Cowboys collection by Lucchese. Shop the collection today at the Lucchese store at the Star in Frisco or online at lucchese.com. Lucchese, the official boot of the Dallas Cowboys and Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
How do you tell the world about all the great gifts in the Yeti store? Let her rip, Troy.
All right, folks, let's get started with the Yeti French Press. Enjoy coffee that stays hot for hours in a French press. 34 ounce for you, 6'4" for the cruise. The Yeti French Press. Up next, waterproof bags. Bags waterproof. Submersible waterproof doubles. Waterproof bags. World's mostly water, so get a waterproof Yeti bag. Do I smell something cooking? Oh, new cast iron skillets made to be passed down like Mama's recipes. Take a steak, cornbread, cobbler's pot pie, and potatoes next level with 3 sizes of Yeti cast iron skillets.
Gear, gifts, and product experts. Visit the Yeti store on McKinney Street and at South Lake Town Square today.
Back to the break.
LG OLED Evo is the best TV in the game, but don't take our word for it. Digital Trends said that LG OLED G4 has the best picture quality they've ever seen. See it for yourself at lg.com/OLED Evo.
Welcome back. We are in the second segment of the break. We're live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. The segment brought to you by blockchain.com. All right, let's talk about the franchise tag. That window opened yesterday. It'll run through March 4th. Just so you have an idea of what the schedule looks like. Free agency, the legal tampering period will start on March 10th. It'll run through 4 p.m. Eastern on March 12th, and that's when free agency will begin, 4 p.m. Eastern on March 12th. That all being said, let's talk specifically about the franchise tag. In my opinion, Osa Odighizuwa is probably the most likely candidate, when anyone, to be franchised by the Cowboys. And I say if anyone because there's a good chance the Cowboys don't use a franchise tag. But I'd like each of you to give me the best reason you can come up with as to why Dallas should use the franchise tag on Osa.
Should.
We'll get to the should not, but let's talk about the should.
I think should you get consistency at that 3-tech spot, and that's you want as much consistency as possible, I think, from a personnel standpoint, so that you're not having to marry so much change personnel-wise with so much change already coming schematically. Are you willing to pay a little bit more than what he would probably get on the open market per year if he were franchise tagged? That's going to be the question. How much is consistency on that defensive line important to you as a personnel guy? So I think that would probably be the strong case for why.
Yeah, I think the why would be because you finally have got to the point where you drafted a player, you've developed him, and now you're starting to see the benefits from the development. There were times where I kind of felt like Osa Odighizuwa was a really good college player. And I mean a good college player because he was playing like 13 games. But it was week 14, 15, 16, and 17 that you were kind of looking like, okay, where did this player go? He plays so hard. He got wore down. You know, there were some struggles there the last month of the season, but he was able to play through all the season as a high-level player. And you saw his ability to tackle. You saw his ability to take on blockers. You saw his ability as a pass rusher. You know, there were so many things that he got better at. So if you're interested in keeping that going forward and seeing continued development, you know, you take that tag, you put it on him for 1 year and you have it, and then you work from there. So you don't lose the opportunity to have a player that looks like he's on the rise right now as far as a guy you developed.
Yeah, I don't think there's anyone on the roster that I would want to use the franchise tag on. But if you're asking, you're presenting this case with Osa as to why they should and why that would make sense money-wise, I don't think so. But he is a guy, just like they all said, you've seen the way that he's developed. Right now, he's at the best moment of his career. Last year, he had such a good year. He's healthy, knock on wood, it stays that way. But he's been he was so productive on the field. And yes, anytime you see that, you want to be able to keep that. You want to be able to keep that consistency in the line. And that would be one position to worry less about, that you have solidified. You have already so many other positions that you have to address. And of course, you want to be able to keep a veteran guy like him that continues to develop and improve. And right now, I don't think we've seen the ceiling for him. I think he's continuing to show you what he brings to the table, and looking at Micah Parsons and figuring out what he has, what they're going to do with his contract and all of that. But the combination of having a guy like Micah and also Osa on that side, we don't know what's going to happen with DeMarcus Lawrence. He's another guy that's becoming a free agent. But those are two guys that if you can keep them together on the line, I mean, it's just going to make your job easier when addressing these other positions.
Yeah, I'll say this. The thing that stands out to me that I think would be a benefit of a franchise tag for him is I think we've seen, as Bryan said, this development over the years. I think he's gotten appreciably better each year. And quite frankly, I think he was the best last year. I want to see what the ceiling is. I want to see if last year was more about contract year. I kind of want to see one more year of it to see, like, what's his real ceiling here?
Right.
And like, could you be on the cusp of a really great defensive tackle that you've developed to this point, and now he goes somewhere else and he's one of the best in the league? That would really upset me, right? So I'm like, franchise tag allows me to get at least one more year to know what I think of him long term and feel more secure in whatever that evaluation is, and then be willing to, if you want to go all in and be able to give him that deal, then you give him that deal. But that one more year, I think, could be helpful for somebody like him who has gotten better every year, but last year, I think, made a big jump. I want to see if he can sustain that through another year before I would pay him the big money.
But do you have the money to be able to make a decision like that?
Who knows?
Like, for the team, it just doesn't seem like it's a good position to place a franchise tag on a guy like him or anybody else on the team, in my opinion.
Well,
but it's like when you look at again, I'm not the salary cap and expert over here, but one thing I know is the Cowboys are struggling with money right now, and it just doesn't seem like the smartest thing to do this year. And with a guy like him, you talk about wanting to see one more year. I think he's had a solid career. Last year was the best one he's had yet. Personally, I don't feel like I need to see more. I just want to keep him here. If that means a long-term deal, then so be it.
Well, don't get me wrong. If you get a long-term deal that makes sense, then great. A long-term deal is always better because you get to take that money, you get to extrapolate the signing bonus over the years of the contract, or you could backload the contract. You can give yourself some cap relief. I think those things are all positive. I guess the way I look at it, though, is there are ways that the Cowboys can create salary cap for this upcoming year. If they feel like that's an important piece, and he's an important piece, I think they could probably do it. Now, it's probably not preferable to do a franchise tag because, again, it is 1 year and all that's going to hit your cap in that 1 year. But I like the idea of being able to, again, if I'm giving an argument as to why, if I can't do a long-term deal with him that makes sense, keeping him around for another year so that I can get a better feel for what his long-term value is, to me would be an advantage.
The thing that I struggle with on using the franchise tag on him is that franchise tag number would be $23.5 million, give or take. It's 23.468, so 23.5. This team has suffered from not having depth, and you need depth going into this next season. So do you spend that $23.5 million on a sure thing at 3-tech? Granted, as you mentioned, it felt like a college player at times because he disappeared in November and December. But
played well up
played
until,
really well.
Yeah.
Played really well this past season. So you have one good year under your belt. How confident do you feel that he can play up to a $23.5 million value? Do you do that, or do you go re-sign Carl Lawson, Chauncey Golston, Jordan Lewis, et cetera, Chuma Udoga if you want an extra offensive lineman for that same amount of price and probably still have some money left over, and you're dealing with a defensive tackle class in this draft that is really strong? You can go find a 3-tech. So
there's
our answer to why you shouldn't, right?
There's the answer. Not anything that has to do with the player, but it all has to do with the players that are potentially available at the 3 technique. I think this is, when you start to talk about the edge class, the defensive tackle class, whether it's the 1 techniques, the 3 techniques, these are the ones that are on the board for you right there. So that would be, if it was a really weak class, say that we had this question about Eric Kendricks. Say, Eric Kendricks played to a level like, would you franchise tag Eric Kendricks? I'm using him as an example. Right. you would say, yeah, I would absolutely consider it because the depth of the linebacker class in this draft is not as deep as it is with the defensive tackles or the edges. So that's the biggest reason why I think I would move on from Osa. And I think Nick made an excellent point about could I earmark that money for other positions and don't let all this depth that you've developed the last 3 years just completely walk out this building.
Okay, let me ask you guys this. Since we've been talking about just the Cowboys potentially changing their approach during free agency, and we talked about how other teams have been successful during free agency being more aggressive, what is the position that you would want to be aggressive at during free agency?
Linebacker.
Okay.
Linebacker. And I know we can't get into specific names, but if you listen to me on other podcasts, I'll talk about those names. You listen to me on 105.3, I'll talk about those names too. But there's a position that I would absolutely look at, and I think it's linebacker, and I think there's some names that you would absolutely like.
I wouldn't hate receiver. I wouldn't hate that approach. I mean, you can't go get the big $30 million guys, but you can go get a $5 to $10 million guy that can finally be a wide receiver 2 to CD.
The other one I would look at an offensive lineman. If I thought there was a tackle or a guard out there that I thought could make me better, a veteran type, especially if I end up losing Zach Martin to retirement, then I would definitely look at that. I think they could use that sort of veteran presence if they find a good veteran. I'm not talking about – this reminds me of kind of when the Cowboys went out to get Kyle Kozar. Kyle Kozar wasn't the best guard in the league, but he was a very, very good, solid, serviceable guard.
On that line,
I would look like a guy. I would look at somebody like that at guard or tackle that I could bring in here to compete.
Let me ask you guys this question then, because there's certain organizations that are putting Zach Martin with other teams. You know, now if Zach Martin in fact was willing to play or is going to play, is he a consideration for you? Because you mentioned, Derek, about talking about going in and signing maybe an offensive lineman, maybe a guard. Should you circle back with Zach Martin and see where that number is?
I would have to feel certain that he is healthy and that he is going to be able to play at a level that's commensurate with what he has been throughout his career. The level that he played last year, I don't know that I'm necessarily interested in that. And we saw this with Tyron when they let Tyron walk. I think it was a similar thing where they kind of thought at that point, it just from an injury standpoint, we couldn't trust it.
Right.
And
so you're at that point with Martin.
I kind of think I am, but I would want to have that conversation with him, a real honest conversation. Like, do you think after this offseason you'll be back, if he wants to come back and play, do you think you'll be at a point where your health will be back to what it was before? Or do you think you're at a point in your career where it's just always going to be stuff? It's always going to be problems. There are always going to be issues. And if he can honestly tell me that he feels like he can be back to where he was, I'll trust him because he's earned that trust. Right. With all he's done for you, he's earned that trust. But I would have that kind of really honest conversation.
So, but if he shows up like in Kansas City and is their starting guard, we're all going to feel terrible, right?
Depends. Yeah. It depends. Like, same thing with Tyron. Yeah. If Tyron would have gone to New York and he would have played great and been healthy, I would have said, wow, maybe they let him go. It's a good example would be DeMarcus. When DeMarcus went to Denver, they let him walk because it was like we just always was there was a lot of injury. Yeah. And then it was a situation where he got there and they just used him in a different way. He wasn't an every down pass rusher, but when they had him out there, he was a difference maker and led that defense all the way to a championship. So it just depends on what you see. If the player goes to another place, like, what do they end up being? Did you make the right evaluation on where they were? Are they really done, or do they still have more left in the tank? And that's why I would have the conversation with Zach to see how he feels about it. And I would trust his evaluation if he told me I'll be good. I promise you I'll be good. I would trust that.
That's the thing. I personally right now don't know I have no idea where he stands right now as far as like his career, when he see himself if he wants to continue to play. Because again, when you look at all the toll that this game takes on your body, and he's had a good career, a really good career, just not with the accomplishment that they all want to get to. So that's the tricky part when you talk about a competitor like him. I think healthy, and let's be honest, I feel like his whole career, a lot of the years he's been here, even though he shows up at every game, he's dealing with something. Like all these offensive linemen,
football players, every single one of them.
Yeah, they're dealing with something. He's just being able to tough it out and be out there and do his job. Last year, it took more than he expected, but I think if he was to come back another year, I think he can still be productive, but there's that point that you just talked about, Derek. It does get to that point of their career where they hit an age, and it's just like inevitably you're going to be dealing with something else, something new is going to pop up, and it's hard to manage that during the season and hoping that they are as productive. And especially when you talk about these changes where you're wanting all the players to be more aggressive and play more tough, that's something that's very complicated. It can be very complicated. But I'm curious to see where he stands. I'm sure we'll hear about it soon enough.
The other thing I think has to be factored in here is listening to or looking at how the teams that they've, particularly Adams, coming from Arizona, they have their offensive linemen pulling quite a bit. Is he at a point in his career where that's something that he can do well consistently? That's another thing you have to kind of consider. It's not going to be the kind of offensive line that he's typically worked in. And so is that going to be something that even exacerbates the problem even more of him not being able to be healthy or him having to be mobile as much as, when you're a young guy and you can kind of get out there and run? It's going to be a little different. So I think all that stuff has to be factored in, but I would trust his evaluation. I would have that conversation with him and trust his evaluation as well. All right, we're going to take our final break. We'll come back. Let's do a little draft preview. We'll get into some first-round guys we think the Cowboys should be looking at. We'll do that when we come back. DallasCowboys.com radio.
If you can't be at the stadium, there's no better way to watch your Cowboys than on an LG OLED Evo TV. That's because everything you see is more lifelike. Every play, every hit. I mean, you might as well be on the sidelines. That's how clear it is. It's all thanks to LG's legendary technology. Perfect black, over 8.3 million self-lit pixels. No one comes close. LG OLED Evo is the best TV in the game for a reason. See for yourself at lg.com/OLED Evo.
They say champions are remembered, but legends are never forgotten. United Ag and Turf offers a winning lineup of John Deere equipment built to tackle any challenge on and off the field. Legendary John Deere tractors, combines, residential mowers, commercial mowers, compact construction equipment, Gator utility vehicles, and a full line of golf and sports turf equipment. United Ag and Turf, the official Ag and Turf equipment supplier of the Dallas Cowboys. Visit UnitedAgAndTurf.com to find a location near you.
If you shout, "How about them Cowboys?" you have that undeniable passion that's the heart of Cowboys Nation. And if you like to drink Dr. Pepper, you love the unique blend of its 23 flavors. Together, your one-of-a-kind fandom paired with the one-of-a-kind taste of a delicious ice-cold Dr. Pepper is the game day lineup that can't be beat. Better yet, gather your Cowboys and Dr. Pepper fan friends to watch the next game and crack open a delicious ice-cold Dr. Pepper for everyone. The wins will be even tastier. It's a pepper thing.
And we're going to overtime.
Erica, how much have I spent on concessions?
For questions about their money, Dallas Cowboys fans can turn to Erica, the virtual financial assistant in the Bank of America mobile banking app. Learn more at bankofamerica.com/Erica by your side. Bank of America, official bank of the Dallas Cowboys. Erica responses may vary. Digital tools featured require downloading the mobile banking app and may only be available on select mobile devices. Erica is a mobile feature only available in the English language. Your chat may be recorded and monitored for quality assurance. Message and data rates and additional terms may apply. Bank of America, N.A., member FDIC.
Todd thought it would be secure to jog in the cheetah savanna. Todd believed the big cat repellent he bought online was reliable. And now, Todd is trying to be faster than this cheetah that can run 80 miles per hour. But the good news is, Todd has AT&T 5G that is fast, reliable, and secure. And he learned the best thing to do is stop running and toss her the backpack with the beef stew. AT&T 5G. Fast, reliable, secure.
5G requires compatible plan and device. 5G may not be available in your area. See att.com/5G for you for details.
Back to the break.
AT&T connecting changes everything.
Welcome back. We are in the final segment of the break live from the SWBC Mortgage Studios at the Star. Let's talk a little draft. Draft preview. As a matter of fact, if you don't know about it, if you've been living under a rock for the last, 20 years, you might not know that we have a show called The Draft Show. It's an excellent show. Brian and Nick are both part of that show, and they do a lot of really good breakdowns on pretty much every player you're going to expect to see called during the draft. So I figured we'd take a little bit of that and we bring it over to our show, since we have two people that are on the draft show, and we'll let you guys give us some a taste of what happens over on the draft show. So I want each one of you guys to give me one player and kind of break down for us what you're looking at, what maybe a comp in the NFL. Just give us a background on one player that you think could be available to the Cowboys in round one that they should be interested in.
Oh, you're going to let me go first?
Always.
After the last time, and you basically berating him. Of course he is.
Nah, of course he is, right? Nick does a fine job with his draft work, so I wouldn't berate him too much. Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State, a wide receiver. He's 6'1", he's 206 pounds. My pro comp to this player, if you can imagine, this is Amon-Ra St. Brown from the Detroit Lions.
Bring him.
What we're talking about here. And I say this because St. Brown is 6'1", he's 195 pounds. He's a serious athlete. And, you know, his family is big in his game. If you know the St. Brown situation, Egbuka is really kind of the same way. His dad is really involved, and I mean in a positive way. This guy's an incredible athlete. I saw a special on him one time where he said, I just took up golf, and they showed his swing, and he looks like a pro golfer now. I mean, the way he's playing is just, he's got that kind of ability, and he's got the ideal height and weight for the position. He's super competitive as a player. He's very aggressive with the run after catch, the body control, the strength, the power which he plays. This guy's a versatile weapon. You can use him on jet sweeps, those little pop passes that we've seen. He's a smooth route runner. He makes sharp, decisive cuts. The best routes he has are the ones that are across the middle of the field. I love when you see him catch the ball on the move, and then his ability to turn it up the field. He is one of the best receivers in the country when it came to playing against man coverage. So this guy knows how to escape, but he can play on all levels of the defense, explosive, elusive, shifty. He's used to playing as the second fiddle. The question is, will he ever be a number one? There's teams that are going to have to take him potentially and make him a one, and I think he'll be just fine. But he's always kind of played in the shadows of another player. But you look at how his numbers and the metrics and all the number, 106 targets, and only had 5 drops and 106 targets. So, you know, that's kind of one of those things that they feed him the football. Even though he's a 2, he's had some really, really nice years at Ohio State, and he could play in a lot of different roles. And I think he would fit that role opposite of what you have with CeeDee Lamb and his ability to play some of that X stuff that they need for the Cowboys.
It would be a nice Robin to have to CeeDee's Batman. As you mentioned, you know, he's lived in the shadows of guys throughout his time at Ohio State, whether it be Jeremiah Smith or going back to Marvin Harrison Jr. Or even further back and early in his college career. But he has the most receiving yards of any Ohio State receiver in Ohio State history. And you think about all the names that have gone through Ohio State, that's really impressive.
Real quick, how much do you think that whatever receiving options the Cowboys look at have to be able to run great routes and get separation? Because I heard this argument the other day, and I think it's a valid one. One of the things we talk about seemingly a lot around here is, man, receivers just weren't open. There was no separation. Yeah. And I know there are bigger receivers in this draft, guys that can go vertical. How much do you think it is a situation, though, just based on this team and what they need, that the Cowboys, if they're going to look at receiver, they need to go for some that really are great route runners and know how to create separation?
If I'm understanding your question correctly, I think finding versatility to match with CeeDee's versatility, is that kind of what you're going for there?
Well, not necessarily. I think what
he wants dudes to get open.
Yeah, guys that run great, like Brian said, crisp routes.
But also get the ball.
By the way, we have some receivers. There's some receivers in the NFL. I would consider CeeDee one of them. CeeDee is a great receiver. I wouldn't consider his greatest asset being he gets separation. Like, he just knows how to catch the ball in traffic.
Dak is one of the best quarterbacks in the league when it comes to throwing contested balls. And to your point, you know, I think a lot of it has to do, Derek, with scheme. You know, and you watch, I mean, I watched Chip Kelly with this Ohio State offense. Now Chip Kelly's moving on to the Las Vegas Raiders. I watched Chip Kelly with this Ohio State group in the way the crossing routes, the vertical routes, the hitches, things. He's putting guys on the move. Mm-hmm. And, you know, the quarterback, Will Howard, did a heck of a job. I mean, where he came from to where he was at Ohio State, he looked like a completely different quarterback playing. And a lot of it has to do with the ability to scheme guys open. And you're one of the most talented teams in the country. You won the national championship for that reason, because you had the players, you had the skill on the outside, whether it was vertical skill, whether it was crossing skill, hit skill, screen skill. There's ways that you can create to get these guys open. I think this guy, when I watch him play, just the smoothness that he plays and that ability to separate. But a lot of these quarterbacks in the National Football League are now having to throw contested routes. You could scheme certain routes open, but there's some that are going to be contested plays. But Dak, he's comfortable throwing that type of, is it always successful? No. Is it successful the majority of the time? Yeah.
So for the quarterback you have, you can actually get away with not having to get the best.
But I'm not saying I don't want receivers that don't separate. But some of these receivers that Nick and I have been talking about on the draft show don't separate, but you absolutely would take them in the first, second, third round. You would absolutely take them. Like I said, you look at these contested catches. This guy was 31st in the country when it came to that. You think of all the wide receivers in college football, and this guy has the ability to separate. But okay, now the corner's made a play on the ball, or the safety's making a play on the ball. You got to have guys when that happens to be able to make plays, and that's why I would draft a kid like this. I think that there is so much to like about this player. The mental makeup. We talked about toughness earlier. His ability to get open, touchdowns, finish, mentality of like, okay, I'm not the number one guy here. I'm going to fit in. I'm going to do what I have to do. This kid makes a lot of sense.
All right. Nick, you're up.
I'm going to go with a trade back scenario in the first round here, just because I don't think
got to get fancy, huh?
Wait a minute, the text didn't say anything about trade back scenario.
He's just making up his own rules.
It did not, because I wouldn't necessarily take this guy at 12, but I think if you were to trade back and pick up some picks, this would be a really
all right.
Good
Get
guy
specific. Where would we trade him back to?
Let's go to like 23.
Ooh,
yeah, let's go to like 23.
That's a nice drop.
Yeah, it is. You're picking up some good value. You probably get
love that for my numbers.
You probably get 2, maybe 3 picks out of that. You could really make something fancy with that. I'm going with Gray Zabel, offensive lineman out of North Dakota State.
All right.
Interior guy.
Where are you going to play him?
And this team, it would be right guard, but I think he has the potential to play anywhere in the interior, and it would give Connor Riley, the new offensive line coach here at Dallas, some flexibility on what he would want to do maybe with a Cooper Beebe. And that flexibility could extend out to the tackle position too with, okay, let's say Tyler Guyton is having another struggling year in 2025. Okay, you have enough confidence in a guy like Gray Zabel to put him at left guard even and kick Tyler Smith out. I'm just saying, this guy gives you flexibility. This guy gives you some versatility inside. He's a bruiser, like I mentioned, versatile. He has a quick anchor. He creates a pocket depth super fast. He was one of the guys that I came away with most impressed from in Mobile. His strength rarely has him knocked off balance, but he does have short arms, hence the projection inside. He has played 4 of the 5 offensive line positions in his time at North Dakota State, but this is a strictly interior guy. He needs to be a little bit better in the run block category. I think that's probably where he needs the most improvement coming into the NFL. And my NFL player comp for him, funny enough, another North Dakota State guy, just because it reminded me of him when he was coming out, was Cody Mauch out of Tampa Bay, who's now starting for them at right guard and has been really, really solid for them. And again, where he would fit, I'd see him at right guard, but really wherever you would want in the interior. I like this player. And going back to Connor Riley, before he was at Kansas State, he was at North Dakota State. So there's a lot of background that he could pick up on Zabel as well that I think would be able to translate to this building.
Yeah, this guy, I think Nick nailed this kid. And I think you could play him in a power scheme. You could play him in a zone scheme, and I think he'll be just fine. He's got agility. He easily makes cutoff blocks. He makes reach blocks. I mean, the knee bend as a pass protector. You can watch him against Colorado to open the day if you're thinking about, well, wait a minute, he plays at North Dakota State. By the way, North Dakota State, their folks, they live here in Frisco because they're in that national championship game every single year. Yeah. So you think you have Green Bay Packer fans in town with that color scheme that they got. But this guy is a good one. He could play tackle. He could play guard. They've used him at center. He didn't look uncomfortable playing that way. The trade back scenario, there's a lot of people talking about him as a late one type of a player. So where Nick dropped you back to, I'm sure he picked up some good draft capital along the way. He got our 4th-round pick back some way, maybe got us an extra 3rd along the way. So, yeah, but a player like that, absolutely at 24, you would consider a guy like this. He's risen up the draft boards that much, but it's not just rising on his own. This is the ability when you really, really watch him, and then you watch him against the good competition where he's shown up.
See, I like everything you said, Nick, but then you just casually threw in there, he needs to improve on the run block, and then you kept talking, and then you lost me right there. I mean, does that not give you any pause and ease? Like, okay, hold on. This is an area that we got to make sure.
Amber, I think this guy excels.
Somebody.
I think this guy excels as a drive blocker. I do.
I
think there's some things. When Nick said it, I was kind of like going, I don't know, man. There's things when, like I say, when I'm talking about the scoops, the reaches, things like that. But there are things that he does as a drive blocker, getting into guys. Now, there's one of my favorite players is Lampkin from North Carolina. You talk about stay on guy, center, but he's only 5'10". Here's a 5'10", 275-pound center guard from North Carolina.
He's awesome.
Fire hydrant.
He blows away any metrics that I've never seen a player like this. But when you talk about a guy that sticks onto the guy and finish, Gray Zabel, and I'm really, again, I appreciate Nick bringing him up because I think that's the spot that Gray Zabel is probably going to go at. And I do think he's probably got a little bit better run blocking traits. I know I see it that way.
Yeah.
And, in the knee bend with the pass protection and all that, this guy is going to be a valuable player for somebody. He should have very well been playing in a Big Ten school. And scouts, hey, we miss players. We miss them. We were when recruiting. I think this kid's got that ability where he could have played at a Wisconsin or played at a Michigan State or maybe even played at Michigan the way that he plays.
Yeah, I probably should have furthered my point there. The reason I say that is when he comes down on his run block, he gets really wide and he can get grabby, and he's had holding penalties called in that area. So that's why I say
another red flag.
Well, that's
so did Tyler Smith. Tyler Smith was a holder too.
Yeah, and I'll take him again.
Oh yeah,
give me another one, I'll take him. All right, we appreciate you guys, Jones. We'll be back next week. Combine's happening next week, so we'll get into some of the information around the combine, some of the things we're looking at as we enter that. I think when we have our show, they won't have started. I don't think they'll start at workouts by then, but it'll be close. It'll be starting around Thursday, I think, is when they'll get started. But we'll have a lot to talk about.
Are y'all here next week?
I'm not.
No.
See, so what are we gonna do?
I didn't know you were going to. You going to Combine too?
Baseball.
Oh,
Rangers baseball. Yeah, I'm crying right now because there's a show going to the Combine and it ain't my show.
Yeah. How did that happen? Never mind. I'm not. We'll talk about that off.
Just opened up a can of worms.
I know, right? I don't want to take you to a bad place. All right, we appreciate you guys joining us. We'll be back next week, or maybe the week after. We'll see. Till then, for Nick Harris, Bryan Broaddus, Amber Garcia, I'm Derek Eagleton. This has been The Break, live on DallasCowboys.com radio.
This has been a production of DallasCowboys.com and the Dallas Cowboys Football Club.
How about this, Cowboys? Yeah!